67 million school-age children are deprived of education, mainly due to financial or social hardship, in many cases stemming from poverty or armed conflict. But in Geneva on Monday, some of the more fortunate kids from around the world were given an opportunity to directly call on top UN officials and world leaders to address their concerns on education and their future. While gathering in front of the United Nations headquarters, the Palais des Nations, just minutes before the opening of the United Nations Economic and Social Council's high-level segment of the Annual Ministerial Review addressing this year's Education for All agenda.
It is important that this council talks about education, but primarily about the economic and social dimension of the education, and this is very important. And so we ask also the question after what is ECOSOC doing, since we are talking on a broader level, the reforms needed inside UN, and I think we need a reform of ECOSOC, that it becomes really the economic and social body in global governance.
What they need to do is they have to have better teachers, and to have better teachers, you have to train better teachers. So you have to have teachers of teachers.
Over 600 participants, including the biggest players in the private sector and civil society, gathered to negotiate issues and insights surrounding education. Many leaders and top UN officials, including the president of ECOSOC, Lazarus Zimbabwe, stressed the need for the full integration of the private sector to advance education in low-income countries and ensure the right to education in the world's least developed countries, necessitating what he called fundamental education reform.
Education involved the ministers of planning and finance, youth, gender, health and labor, among others, to design curricula that teaches skills that are relevant and needed by the economies and private sector job markets. A consensus that brings innovative solutions to challenges of access to education, particularly to the girl child in developing countries, especially the least developed.
We have said since 2000 that we will meet the Millennium Development Objectives by 2015. Broken dreams because millions of school children or potential school children depend on us. And broken trust because never again will the relationship between rich and poor countries be based on the trust that was engendered by the promise that was made in 2000. A promise, if betrayed, will never allow us to make promises in the same way again, with trust being part of people's view of how they might be delivered. We're at a fork in the road because we have a crisis in education. 67 million children do not go to school. Educational expenditure in aid is not going to rise, but is likely to fall in real terms over the next few years.
I think that the key thing is to acknowledge that we have a growth model that produces inequality. And on that basis, we have to take a look at how can we change that growth model so that it produces more balance, more social justice, and better results for all. Now that essentially means concentrating on making the growth model produce jobs. Today what you have is a growth model that is very much concentrated and managed by the financial sector because it's more profitable. So it's more profitable to invest in a financial product than to invest in a real economy company.
I don't think corporate social responsibility is going to solve the problem. It's too small, and it's a good start, and it gets companies thinking about these issues. The example of my own company, which has really invested, I think, over $500 million in education programs of one kind or another, that has been driven not really fundamentally by corporate social responsibility, but by kind of mutual self-interest.
Governments must act to invest out of crisis through education, and the international community must act to meet the commitments it has made. Here comes the importance of innovative financing, as we do now partnerships with the private sector. We can bridge these gaps, ladies and gentlemen, if we work together better. This means strengthening coordination between the Education for All convening agencies and with partners like the International Labour Organization, where we work on the technical and vocational education and training, and the World Health Organization to strengthen the close link between health and education.
Some gains in education have been made, including an additional 52 million children who enrolled in primary school in the last decade to 2008, said ECOSOC. However, nearly 800 million people are still illiterate. And of the 67 million school-aged children who remain deprived of an education, almost 3/4 of those children are in sub-Saharan Africa or Southern Asia.
More resources have to be sent towards the education programs and fast-track education program, especially for the most vulnerable countries and the least developed countries, small island developing state and landlocked developing countries. And former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom have proposed an idea of setting up a global fund that will fund the education program. I think that is a good idea.
We indeed are honored to have the top NGOs and technology companies represented at this 2011 ECOSOC Innovation Fair. Over the next 4 days, member states, civil society representatives, and the public can come here to learn about the projects and products that have had a positive impact on our Education for All agenda.
UN Deputy Secretary General Asha Rose Magiro opened the ECOSOC Innovation Fair, which runs parallel to the ECOSOC Substantive Meeting, a trade show-style exhibition revealing new approaches and projects tackling issues on education to help ensure the achievement of education for all and ultimately the Millennium Development Goals by 2015 and beyond. The alarming fear is that 75 million more children may be out of school by 2015, said Gordon Brown, UK's former Prime Minister, quoting projections from a UNESCO report, making consensus and action on these negotiations all the more crucial. The high-level segment will run through July 8th, where a ministerial declaration is expected to be adopted on education for all. Afaf Kanja for South News at the United Nations, Geneva, Switzerland.